Welcome to Ragamuffin Patterns, Sewing Basics. Today we're going to talk about your machine, parts of your machine, the different types of stitching, and ways to use it for knits or woven fabrics, whatever it is you're sewing. Most people tend to be a little nervous at first, so I hope this helps ease your mind and makes you really want to go for it and start sewing. Okay, so here we are at my sewing machine. I have a Kenmore. It's a very basic sewing machine. I don't have any fancy digital displays or anything with this one. Very easy, user-friendly. So let's go over some of the basic parts. This is where you would put your standard spool of thread. I don't use regular thread since I run sergers most of the time. I buy cone thread. So in order to use cone thread with my machine, I have cone thread holders. I have two, so I can run a twin needle and have thread both needles. Let's look at the bobbin. So we're going to open up the bobbin casing, and it comes all the way out. I saw the other day somebody was having an issue where this whole entire thing came out, and they did not know what to do. It does come out. It's great if you're going to clean it. Sometimes dust gets in here. You have your feed dogs underneath your presser foot, and sometimes things will get jammed. Sometimes the thread will get jammed, and you need to take the whole thing out in order to unknot your thread and clean that out. Every machine is going to be slightly different, so check your manual for the exact steps. But as far as mine goes, this is how I do it. So if yours is apart or you've taken it apart, this piece goes in first. Slides right back in. Once that's in, this piece goes on top of it. And you see these two little knobs here? These black levers are going to slide over the top of it to keep it in place. Okay, so now this is your bobbin. A lot of people don't realize that your bobbin has a little screw on here. Most of them do. Again, every machine is going to be slightly different. But this little screw will adjust the tension between this flat piece of metal and the little slit that your thread will go through when we load our bobbin. Mine likes the thread to go to the right. So that means when I load my bobbin, my thread is going to the right. It's not coming this way or reversed like this. Like it's going to be up, and to the right. So we're going to slide that right inside our bobbin case, and I'm going to put the thread through there. You want to make sure that it's loaded in your bobbin correctly and the thread is coming through the proper places. If it doesn't catch in the certain areas, it will cause problems, and then you'll be like, what is happening? I don't understand. So we're going to slide that back in here. You'll hear a little click. There's a little lever, and everything is right back in place. Now we're going to thread the rest of the machine. So I'm running black thread through my needles and red thread through my bobbin. That's so we can check tension and we can see which one is off, if it's off, or which one needs help. So we're going to go through up here. This is thread guide 1 for me. And we're going to go down and up. Mine has nice little guides on here to show me which ways thread needs to go. This little guy right here has this little hole right here. So when the thread comes through, it goes up and through this hole. If it's not in this uptake lever, if it's not in this correctly, that's going to throw off everything. That's going to make it bunch up inside the bobbin. It's going to cause you all kinds of grief. So make sure it's hitting, when you thread your machine, it goes through all the thread guides properly and through this uptake lever. Okay. So now we have our machine properly threaded. The bobbin is in place. You're going to hold your thread. Don't let it go, because then it may slip and slide out and you won't catch your bobbin thread. So we're going to hold this We're going to make sure that we put our thread underneath the presser foot, and we're going to hand crank wind down, up and down the needle. You can see it has caught the bobbin thread, and I'm just going to pull out the bobbin thread. Close up our bobbin housing, and this is called a free arm. This is great to take off if you're doing hems on small objects like sleeves or cuffs. We're going to put it back on for our sewing right now though. Okay, our machine's all ready to go. So let's talk about our dials. This is your tension. This, for me, on my machine, please check yours for your own settings, but for me, this is the pattern which corresponds with these numbers here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and a buttonhole. Same thing over here. Each one of these has its own stitch style that it will sew, and that corresponds with the number here. This is your stitch length. If I were to do buttonholes, see, I'm following the blue buttonhole guides. Otherwise, this is going to be a very, very tight stitch length, very short together. The bigger the number for my machine, the longer the stitch. So for knits, I like a 4. I like a 4 for top stitching, on wovens as well. So anytime your stitches are going to show, this is the one I'm going to use, a top stitch. Sewing basic cotton wovens, I'm going to do a 2.5. That seems to work best for my machine. So I'm going to put that back to 4 since I have knit over here. And in the files in the Sew Along group, I have worksheets for you to download if you'd like. One is for stitches, to practice your stitches. It's just trace onto your fabric. One is a curved line, one is a jagged line, and one is a straight line. Trace them on your fabric and you guys can practice staying along those lines. Make sure you backstitch, which for my machine is right here. There's also a worksheet for naming the parts of the sewing machine. Getting familiar with your sewing machine is really important. If you know what everything is, you're less likely to be nervous to touch it or move it or change the dial and play around with it. I really do encourage testing things out and seeing what things do, which is what we're about to do now. I'm going to run a few test stitches just to see what we're looking at right now. This is presser foot lever. It moves the foot up and down. When you're not sewing, your presser foot should be down. That relieves tension and strain on the mechanism inside if it's not in use. So lift it up. We're going to slide the fabric under, place it down, and just go slow. Just go slow, one stitch at a time. Now I didn't backstitch here because I want to show you. Without backstitching, I'm pulling this out, and it has basically almost gathered a little bit right here. When I pulled on it to remove it, it pulled all the threads and it made it a little messed up. So we're going to go back and we're going to backstitch. So I want to make sure my tension is spot on for the fabric that I'm using. That's the purpose of using test squares. This is double brush poly. It has really nice stretch in all directions. Okay, so again, place it in there. I'm going to start on the other side this time, just because. Okay, so this time we're going to backstitch. So you're going to go 2 or 3 stitches forward. Okay, then you're going to hit your backstitch button. Some machines have them over here. Mine is right here. I'm going to hold my backstitch lever down, and it's going to actually feed the fabric backwards. So you watch. 1, 2. Okay, and then you let go. Now I'm going to go back over the stitches. This is what locks them in place so they don't slide like they did with the other one, with the last set of test stitches that we did. Okay, when I come to the end of my line, I'm going to again backstitch. And if you notice, I'm not pulling or pushing the fabric at all. I'm gently guiding it. It's very loose to the touch. So So now when I pull this out, you can see that it's not gathered and bunched as it was before. There's my bobbin, and there's my front stitches. So there you go, that's a straight stitch. To practice that, you can keep going, just go down the whole length. Use your guide, use the presser foot edge right here as a guide, and you can just continue to sew. And this is great for kids to learn how to stay straight as they're sewing. As long as you're not going too fast, you really just very gently, you really don't need to pull or push the fabric. It's just a very gentle guide. See, and my hand's not even on it mostly. Just very gentle. Always bring the needle to the upright position, and that'll make the threads loosen up. They won't be so tight, the tension. It'll loosen the tension so you can pull them out easier. So there we go. Nice and straight lines. The other one on your practice sheet is a zigzag line, and that's to practice turning the corner. So when you turn a corner, depending on what you're sewing, if it's a sharp corner, that's what the zigzag is to help you with that skill. So we're just going to go and make a zigzag here. Again, back stitching. Okay. Once I've back stitched, I'm going to go straight. And when I come to the turn, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pick up my presser foot, and I'm going to turn the fabric the appropriate angle to finish the turn. And there you go. That's how you make corners. Now, if I were to sew this this is knit. So if I'm making, like we're gonna make our shirts, you're gonna wanna use a zigzag stitch. So once you're comfortable going straight and making those turns, I'm gonna reset my machine for zigzag. This is how we're gonna sew the seams on our shirt. So my machine has several different kinds of zigzags. There's a stretch stitch as well, but I'm just going to use this regular zigzag. It makes things a lot easier for me. I don't have to mess around with all these other settings. So my pattern is number 3. Always make sure that your needle is not down. It is not in any fabric when you change your stitch. If it's in the fabric, it will break because it's going to be down inside, and when you change that, it's going to try to shift and it will pull and just snap in half. So please, when you change your stitches, make sure it's upright. So okay, so there we go. So now I'm on zigzag, I'm on 4, and let's see what the zigzag looks like. You'll see the needle moving side to side. Again, now I'm done. I'm at the end of my line. I'm going to bring the needle back up to the upright center position, lift up my lever and pull back gently, snip the thread. And I didn't back stitch, so it's doing that gathering again. So now you can see zigzags. Okay. Some machines will tell you not to zigzag and back stitch. However, my machine is okay with that. Like, I do it all the time. I back stitch with zigzags. I back stitch with twin needles. I've never had a problem. So I really don't know what machines say you can't, but I have heard that you shouldn't. but I don't know that to be true for me. So we're going to go a couple, and we're going to back stitch a few, and then go forward. Nice and easy. And come to the end of our line, we're going to back stitch, and then go forward. Lift up the presser foot. Bring the needle to the upright position using the hand wheel. Pull straight back. Snip it, and then you'll see another set of zigzags. Using a zigzag on knit is great because it allows the knit to move and stretch the way it needs to. What's not so great is you'll end up seeing the stitches pull through. So in order to reduce that, if you're not using a serger, you can sew right over the top of it with a long straight stitch. So we're going to move our needle back and just go right over that. Again, bring the needle to the upright position, lift up your presser foot, and pull straight back. And now I've secured that zigzag. It still has a little bit of room to move because it is knit, but you have a nice seam and you don't see those stitches. Okay, so that's all for today. So practice those stitches, get to know your machine, play around with the settings, and just know that there's nothing you can do that can't be undone. If you change something, you can always put it back. Good thing to know is when you find a good setting, when you find the perfect tension or something, write it down. Write down what fabric you were using. Write down the tension dial setting. Write down the stitch length, all of that information. Just so you have it, and if anything gets bumped or moved or you decide to change it for a different project, you can always go back to what works for your machine. Everything you do with your sewing machine is going to be different from somebody else's sewing machine. The wear, if it's new, if it needs to be cleaned or oiled, like everything will change the settings slightly. So if somebody tells you use a 2.5-inch stitch length, it might work better with a 3 for you. Or if someone tells you, hey, use your tension at a 4, your machine might work better at a 3 because maybe their tension dial is worn a little from being used too much and yours isn't. So that will all these little things will change the way your machine sews. Just make sure you keep track of how it's running and what works best for your machine. And tomorrow we will work on cutting out our shirt and getting it ready to sew.